Ethan Thorne spent over $1 million customizing a vintage wedding dress for me from Paris, saying I'd wear it on our wedding day. He called it a once-in-a-lifetime romantic gesture, promising me the perfect dream. But when I tried it on, I couldn't even zip it up. The waist was a size too big, yet the bust felt suffocatingly tight. I thought the designer had mixed up the measurements and flipped up the skirt to find the tag. That's when I noticed a few words embroidered in silver thread on the delicate tulle closest to the heart. Sera, forever. I thought it was a romantic blessing from the French designer, until I scrolled past a ballerina on Instagram. She was wearing the prototype of this very wedding dress, with a caption that read, "Thank you. Even if I'm not the bride, you hid my name in the place closest to your heart." And her ID was Sera. I calmly took off the $1 million wedding dress. I'm not getting married. The custom haute couture wedding dress, air freighted from Paris, hung in the most prominent spot in the VIP fitting room. Layers upon layers of silk chiffon, embedded with thousands of hand-sewn Swarovski crystals. Under the lights, it shimmered and sparkled, like an ethereal dream. The store manager, along with 3 assistants, carefully helped me put it on. "Miss Hayes, Mr. Thorne really outdid himself for you. He oversaw everything from design to final fitting, even personally selecting the lace pattern." The manager sighed with envy as she adjusted my skirt. I looked at myself in the mirror, but a frown creased my brow. "The zipper won't go up." An assistant struggled for a long time behind me, sweat beading on her forehead. "Miss Hayes, have you gained a little weight recently? The waist is quite loose, but the bust and back are really too tight." I didn't say anything. My weight hadn't changed much in years. I'd had a physical last week, and it was exactly the same. My figure had always been standard, but the cut of this dress was clearly for an extremely slender, almost flat-chested girl. "Maybe I haven't rested well these past few days. I feel a little swollen." I offered a casual excuse. "In that case, please take it off, and we'll have the tailor add a bit of allowance." The assistants helped me out of the dress. The heavy skirt piled onto the carpet. As I bent to lift the hem, my fingers inadvertently brushed against a sheer fabric on the inside of the bodice. There was a slight protrusion. I thought it was a loose thread, but when I flipped it over, I froze. In the spot closest to the heart, a line of words was intricately embroidered with incredibly subtle silver thread. "Sera, forever." The silver thread gleamed with a cold, piercing light under the cool white lamps. "Miss Hayes, what's wrong?" The manager noticed my changed expression and leaned in to look. "Oh, was this something Mr. Thorne specifically requested?" Young couples these days love this kind of exclusive romance, embroidering each other's names or vows into the wedding dress. The manager smiled, a hint of suggestive amusement to her eyes. I didn't smile. "My name is Aurora Hayes. Ethan usually called me Rory or my full name. Who is Sera?" I clutched the tulle, my fingertips turning white. "I'm not trying it on anymore." I let go, allowing the $1 million wedding dress to fall to the floor. "Miss Hayes? We haven't even altered the size yet." "No need to." I changed back into my regular clothes, grabbed my bag, and walked out of the bridal shop without looking back. Sitting in my car, I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and typed Sera into Instagram's search bar. In the age of big data, no secret can stay hidden. Especially not when Ethan Thorne's social circle was so small. After just a few pages, an account verified as a young ballerina popped up. The profile picture was the back of a woman in a white swan ballet tutu. Account ID, Sera. I clicked on her profile. The top pin video was posted a week ago. In the video, she was dancing gracefully in a rehearsal room, wearing an initial prototype almost identical to the haute couture wedding dress I had just tried on. Because it was a sample, it wasn't encrusted with crystals, but the cut, style, and even the direction of the lace were exactly the same. She was incredibly slender, with a flat chest and a delicate waist. The dress fit her perfectly, seamlessly, as if it were a second skin. The video's caption read, "He said he would make my dream a reality. Thank you. Even if I'm not the bride, you hid my name in the place closest to your heart." A comment below asked, "Wow, such a beautiful wedding dress. Are you getting married?" Sera replied, "No, it's a gift from a very important person. Unfortunately, I can't wear it to walk towards him." I stared at the screen, a sudden wave of nausea washing over me. 3 years. I'd been with Ethan Thorne for 3 years. I thought I was his carefully chosen fiancé. It turned out I was just a stand-in, forced to wear someone else's hand-me-down wedding dress. A stand-in who didn't even fit the dimensions. I drove home. This apartment, located downtown, was the wedding home Ethan had bought. Opening the door, I was met with a panorama of black, white, and gray. Hard, cold marble floors, a black leather sofa, and a minimalist metal coffee table utterly devoid of any warmth. Before we moved in, I'd enthusiastically shown him soft furnishing catalogs. I'd said I wanted a cream-colored fabric sofa, a fluffy rug in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, and a few brightly colored oil paintings. Ethan had looked up from his computer, his brow slightly furrowed. "Rory, those things are too cluttered, too tacky. A home needs quality, not cheap coziness." I compromised. Over 3 years, I had compromised countless times. I thought it was just as occupational hazard as a CEO, accustomed to rigidity and efficiency. Now that I thought about it, it wasn't that at all. I walked to the living room's floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the gray sky. The lock chimed. Ethan was back. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, his tie loosened slightly, his eyes holding their usual fatigue and indifference. "How is the wedding dress fitting?" he asked casually as he changed his shoes. "It didn't fit." I turned to face him. "What didn't fit?" He walked to the island counter and poured himself a glass of ice water. The size was wrong. The waist was too big, the bust too tight. Ethan paused his drinking, then frowned. "That was cut by the Paris atelier according to the golden ratio. Have you been slacking on your workouts lately? Is your posture off?" Haute couture is about the person adapting to the dress, not the dress adapting to the person. His tone was condescending, lecturing. The person adapting to the dress. I suddenly felt like laughing. Really? Because I feel like that dress wasn't tailored for me to begin with. Ethan put down his water glass, his gaze hardening. "Aurora, what kind of tantrum are you throwing now? That wedding dress cost me $1.2 million. Do you know how much effort I put in to get the chief designer to rush it? Can't you be more reasonable?" Reasonable? I looked at the face I had loved for 3 years. He was handsome, wealthy, and in outsider's eyes, a flawless fiancé. But at this moment, I only felt a profound unfamiliarity. Ethan, was Sera embroidered inside the dress part of the golden ratio? The living room fell silent. Ethan's pupils constricted, and the muscles in his jawline tensed sharply. But he quickly regained his composure, his voice not even wavering. "You saw it." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Yes, I saw it." I stared into his eyes. "Aren't you going to explain?" Ethan quirked his lips, a look of extremely perfunctory helplessness. "That's just a friend." The initial design draft of this dress was something I drew many years ago to help her achieve a stage dream. With the wedding approaching quickly, I just used that old draft. The words? The studio messed up, thinking it was the bride's name. I've already had someone sent to remove it. A friend. I took a step closer to him. A friend whose name you need to embroider on your fiancé's wedding dress, closest to her heart. Aurora. He raised his voice, clearly losing patience. "I told you, the studio made a mistake. Do you have to be so petty about a trivial matter? The invitations have already been sent, the wedding venue booked. Are you trying to make us a laughingstock by pulling this stunt now?" He was always like this. Whenever I questioned him, he'd label me unreasonable or petty, as if I was always the one at fault. He sighed, pulled a velvet box from his pocket, and held it out to me. "All right, don't be mad anymore. I passed an auction house today, and this necklace looked perfect for you, so I bought it. Consider it my apology." I didn't take it. The box was open. Inside lay an incredibly luminous South Sea pearl necklace. I looked at the pearls and said softly, "Ethan, I'm allergic to pearls. They make my neck break out in a rash." "I've told you 3 times. Ethan's hand froze midair. A flicker of panic finally crossed his eyes. "I'm sorry, I've been so busy lately, I got it mixed up." "Got it mixed up?" I curled my lips. "Did you get it mixed up, or did you subconsciously think the person standing here should be Sera, the one who loves pearls?" In every one of Sera's photos, she wore pearls around her neck. Ethan slammed the box shut, his face turning ashen. "Aurora, you're being utterly unreasonable." He turned and walked towards a study, slamming the door shut with a bang. I stood in the empty living room, not shedding a single tear. My heart had simply died. When all the details came together, the truth was often uglier than imagined. The next day, Ethan went to the office. I didn't go to work. I walked to the study door and tried the handle. It wasn't locked. Ethan had a habit. He didn't like anyone touching his things, especially the safe at the very bottom of his desk. He said it contained the company's core secrets. I used to believe him implicitly, even carefully avoiding it when I cleaned. But today, I wanted to open it. I knelt in front of the safe, looking at the keypad. 6 digits. I typed in my birthday. A red light blinked. Incorrect password. I typed in our anniversary. Incorrect password. I typed in Ethan's own birthday. Still incorrect. I paused for a long time, my finger hovering, trembling slightly. Then I took out my phone and pulled up Sera's account. 2 years ago, she had posted a birthday video. The date was October 27th. I took a deep breath and pressed 102799. She was born in 99.
Click.
A green light illuminated, and the heavy metal door sprang open. In that instant, I felt something inside me shatter. Inside the safe, there were no company confidential documents. No multi-million-dollar contracts. Only a few exquisitely crafted storage boxes. I opened the first box. Inside was a thick stack of ballet performance tickets. Every single one was for Sera's performances. The dates ranged from 3 years ago, all the way up to last month. On the 15th of last month, Ethan told me he was going to London for a business trip to discuss a crucial merger. But the location on that ticket was the Paris Opera House. I opened the second box. Inside was a thick stack of boarding passes. Ethan's name and Sera's name were printed side by side. Destinations spanned the globe. I thought he was working hard for our future. Countless nights I worried about his exhaustion. It turned out he was just traveling the world with another woman. The last box contained a sketchbook. I opened it. Inside were all his hand-drawn designs. Wedding dresses, evening gowns, everyday wear. The bottom right corner of each one read, "To my little swan, Sera." The very last drawing was of that million-dollar haute couture wedding dress. The note beside it read, "Waist 23 inches, bust 31.5 inches. She's too thin. Add a few layers of silk, so it doesn't look flimsy." My waist was 25 inches, my bust 34.5 inches. No wonder I couldn't wear it. No wonder he thought I was lacking exercise. I put everything back into the safe exactly as I found it and closed the door. When I stood up, my vision blurred, and I had to hold onto the desk for a long time to steady myself. 3 years. Over 1,000 days and nights. I thought I was the most intimate person in his life. It turned out I didn't even have the right to enter the most secret corners of his heart. I was just a shield. A perfect fiancé he used to appease his parents and the outside world when he couldn't openly marry Sera. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend, Chloe Green. "Chloe, are you free for lunch? Let's meet up." "What's wrong? Your voice is so hoarse. Do you have a cold?" "No." I looked at the sunlight outside the window. "I just feel like it's time for me to wake up." Chloe and I met at a discreet coffee shop. After hearing my story, Chloe was so furious, she almost crushed her coffee cup. "That jerk, Ethan. How dare he?" Chloe suddenly stood up, drawing glances from people around us. I tugged at her sleeve. "Sit down. Don't get so worked up." "How can I not get worked up?" Chloe lowered her voice, her eyes red. "Aurora, how have you been surviving these past 3 years? You even gave up your beloved design career for him. You willingly went to his company to be an uncredited ghost designer. Which of his new brand, Thorne's hit products, wasn't something you stayed up all night drawing? How dare he treat you like this?" She was right. I used to be an award-winning new designer. When Ethan was starting his business, his funding ran out and he couldn't afford good designers. Without a second thought, I resigned from my high-paying job and joined his company. To avoid suspicion and not overshadow him, none of my designs were ever credited. The outside world thought Ethan Thorne was a business prodigy and a design genius. Only I knew that those stunning works were born from my tireless efforts, stroke by stroke. "Chloe, crying won't help." I stir my coffee, my eyes as cold as ice. "I didn't ask you to meet me today to cry."
Chloe paused, looking at me.
"Then what do you plan to do? Break off the engagement just like that?" "That's letting those two off easy. The engagement is definitely off." I put down my spoon. "But I'm not letting him off easy." "How so?" "The wedding venue is the top hotel in the city. The deposit was $50,000. That wedding dress, $1.2 million. And other miscellaneous preparation costs. It all adds up to nearly $200,000. I looked at Chloe. All that money came from my parents. Ethan had said his company was having cash flow problems, and my parents, feeling sorry for me, had pulled out their life savings without hesitation. If I unilaterally announce the breakup now, according to the contract, none of those deposits will be refunded. Chloe gasped. "Damn it. He used your parents' money to make a wedding dress for his white moonlight."
Exactly.
"So I need evidence," I calmly analyzed. "I need to prove that he was at fault first, that he violated the principle of fidelity in our engagement. Only then can I, through a lawyer, get all that money back, down to the last penny. Not only that, I also wanted to reclaim everything that belonged to me. My designs, my hard work, my dignity." Chloe looked at me, her anger slowly turning to heartache. "Aurora, you've changed. People always have to grow up." I smiled faintly. I used to think love could sustain you, but now I realize that money and a career are the most reliable things. What do you need me to do? Chloe asked without hesitation. Help me contact the best lawyer in the city for divorce and contract disputes. I looked at her. The tougher, the better. No problem. Leave it to me. After parting ways with Chloe, I didn't go home. Instead, I went to a shopping mall. I bought several sets of brightly colored clothes. Red, bright yellow, royal blue. I threw all those black, white, and gray clothes into the trash. Ethan loved minimalism, but I, Aurora Hayes, was born to love passion and vibrancy. The trash chute of my luxury apartment building swallowed the last of my muted, gray cashmere sweaters with a dull, distant thud. Standing in the hallway, dressed in a newly purchased cobalt blue silk trench coat, I felt a strange, light sensation in my chest. For 3 years, I had dressed like a shadow to match Ethan's austere, minimalist aesthetic. I had faded myself out so he could
Shine.
no more. When I returned to the apartment, the silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a blank canvas. I went straight to Ethan's study. Using the key I had slipstreamed from his keyring the night before, I unlocked his desk drawers. I wasn't looking for love letters. I was looking for paper trails. My parents had wired $1.2 million to the Paris atelier under the impression that they were paying for their daughter's dream wedding dress. They had also transferred another $250,000 for the venue deposit at the Grand Regency and various high-end vendors. If I simply called off the wedding, the contracts, carefully signed by Ethan on behalf of our future, stipulated that all deposits were non-refundable in the event of a unilateral cancellation by the bride's side. I needed to prove that Ethan had committed fraud and breached his fiduciary duty by using those funds for non-wedding expenses, specifically his mistress. I booted up his work laptop. His password was his standard corporate combination, but the folder marked personal/events was encrypted. I tried the password to his safe, 102799. The folder clicked open. Inside were PDF invoices from the Paris atelier. My breath hitched as I read the line items. The initial $1.2 million invoice had been altered. The original draft, the one designed for Sera's measurements, had been paid for using the first installment of my parents' money. There was an email thread between Ethan and the chief designer, Monsieur Laurent. Ethan Thorne. The client's measurements have changed slightly for the final fitting. Please adjust the bust to a standard US size 4, but keep the waist at the original draft size 0. The bride-to-be has gained a bit of weight, but I want the silhouette to remain as close to the original muse's proportions as possible. The cold-blooded calculation of it made my stomach turn. He hadn't just used an old draft. He had actively ordered the dress to be altered to an impossible hybrid size, fully knowing it wouldn't fit me, just to preserve the muse's silhouette closest to his heart. I copied the entire email thread, the bank transfer receipts, and the digital design files onto a secure flash drive. Next, I opened the folder labeled Thorne Brand, Autumn/Winter Drafts. Inside were the high-definition scans of the designs I had stayed up until 3 o'clock a.m. drawing for him over the last 6 months. They were the crown jewels of his upcoming Autumn/Winter collection, the very designs slated to be showcased at the prestigious Metropolitan Fashion Week in 3 weeks. Ethan had already registered the trademark applications under his own name,
Claiming sole authorship.
but he had made one critical mistake. Because I was the one who actually created the files, the original metadata on the raw CAD and Photoshop files still carried my digital signature and the unique serial number of my personal drawing tablet. I exported the raw files with their original metadata, along with the timestamped email exchanges where I had sent him the completed drafts from my personal account. As I ejected the flash drive and closed the laptop, the front door lock chimed. I slipped the drive into my trench coat pocket, took a deep breath, and walked out to the living room. Ethan was standing by the entrance, loosening his tie. When he saw me, his eyes traveled down my cobalt blue coat. His brow furrowed instantly. "Where did you get that coat?" he asked, his voice laced with disapproval.
The
"Color is incredibly loud, Aurora. It doesn't suit the aesthetic of this space." I felt like a change, I said, my voice remarkably calm. I was tired of looking like a wet slate. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't have the energy for your sudden whims.
today.
The Autumn/Winter show is in 3 weeks, and the investors are breathing down my neck." "Did you finish the revisions on the wool coat designs?" I asked. I did," I replied, offering a tight, polite smile. They're completely finished. You'll see them on the runway. He nodded, satisfied, entirely missing the double meaning in my words. Good.
At
Least you're still being useful. I'm going to the study. Don't disturb me. I watched his retreating back. Enjoy your study, Ethan, I thought. While you still have one. The next morning, I met Marcus Vance in a private room at a high-end club.
downtown.
Marcus was a legend in the city's legal circles. He was a sharp, impeccably dressed man in his late 40s with a reputation for being a shark in asset recovery and intellectual property disputes. Chloe had pulled several strings to get me an appointment on such short notice. I laid the flash drive, the financial statements, and a printed folder of evidence on the table between us. My fiancé used my parents' money to buy a custom wedding dress design for his mistress, altered it to fit neither of us properly, and spent our venue deposits on trips with her, I said, keeping my tone professional and clear. Furthermore, he has stolen my intellectual property for his fashion brand, Thorne, which is about to launch its flagship collection. Marcus adjusted his glasses and began flipping through the documents.
For 10
minutes, the only sound in the room was the rustle of paper. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. Miss Hayes, usually proving intellectual property theft in creative industries is an uphill battle, but you have kept the raw metadata of your designs.
That
Tablet serial number is registered to your name, and these timestamps predate his trademark filings by months. And the wedding funds?
I asked.
This is where it gets interesting, Marcus said, tapping a finger on the Paris.
Atelier Savoie.
Your parents wired the money directly to his business account under a written agreement, which I see here in your emails, that the funds were strictly earmarked for wedding preparation expenses. By using those funds to commission a dress with another woman's name embroidered on it, and by using the venue deposit accounts to fund personal travel with a third party, he has committed civil fraud and unjust enrichment. Can we get the money back? Every single cent, Marcus said, his eyes gleaming. But if we file a standard lawsuit now, he will tie us up in court for years using his company's legal team. He'll delay the proceedings until after the Metropolitan Fashion Week launch, secure his investor funding, and then settle with you out of court for a fraction of what he owes, while keeping the credit for your designs. I don't want a settlement, I said quietly. I want my name on my designs.
And
I want him to feel the exact weight of the humiliation he planned for me. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, looking at me with newfound respect. Then we don't sue him yet. We let him proceed. We let him build his stage, invite his investors, and prepare his grand triumph. And then we pull the rug. What's the plan? We file for a preliminary injunction for copyright infringement, but we request an expedited, sealed emergency hearing scheduled for the morning of his fashion show, Marcus explained. Simultaneously, we prepare a freezing order on his business accounts based on the financial fraud.
we serve him the papers on the
Day of the show. He will either have to cancel the entire runway, which will bankrupt him and destroy his reputation with investors, or he will have to publicly acknowledge you as the sole designer and return your family's money on the spot to save his brand. And the wedding? I asked. Oh, the wedding will be the perfect curtain call, Marcus murmured. But first, we must make sure he suspects absolutely nothing. For the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the dutiful, quiet fiancé. I helped Ethan coordinate the final details of the wedding, which was scheduled for the weekend after the fashion show. I smiled when his mother called to lecture me about the seating arrangements. I nodded when Ethan told me he would be working late at the studio on Friday nights, knowing he was actually staying at a boutique hotel downtown with Sera. But the most difficult part was the fitting. Miss Hayes, we've removed the silver embroidery as Mr.
Thorne requested. The
bridal shop manager told me over the phone, her voice hesitant. And we've adjusted the waist slightly, but because of the fabric cut, we can only do so much without ruining the lace. It's fine, I said. Just deliver it to the venue. Don't worry about the fit. Are you sure? Perfectly sure. 3 days before the fashion show, Ethan held an exclusive pre-gala dinner at an upscale French restaurant. It was a private gathering for Thorne's major investors, elite fashion editors, and a few select guests. I wore a striking crimson-red silk gown. It was a bold, structural piece I had designed myself years ago but had never worn because Ethan claimed red was too aggressive. When we arrived, Ethan looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. Red, Aurora? You look different. Almost unrecognizable. You'll have to get used to it, I said, offering a serene smile as I swept past him into the venue. As the dinner progressed, the door opened, and a woman glided in. She was incredibly delicate, her movements carrying the unmistakable grace of a professional ballerina. She wore a simple cream-colored silk dress, and around her neck was a breathtaking double-strand South Sea pearl necklace. It was Sera. My hand tightened around my champagne flute, but my face remained an unreadable mask of polite interest. Ethan's posture instantly stiffened. He glanced at me quickly, checking my reaction, but I merely took a sip of my champagne. Sera, one of the investors, a wealthy textile magnate named Mr. Vance, no relation to Marcus, called out. The muse of the hour. Ethan, you must introduce us properly. Ethan cleared his throat, his usual confidence faltering for a split second. Everyone, this is Sera. She is a close friend of the brand. Her grace was the inspiration behind several of the silhouette choices in the upcoming collection. Sera offered a sweet, fragile smile. Her eyes flicked to me, holding a subtle, triumphant gleam. She walked over to our table, her pearls catching the soft
candlelight.
Nice to meet you, Miss Hayes, Sera said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I've heard so much about you from Ethan. He always says how supportive you are behind the scenes. Behind the scenes is where the real work happens, after all, I replied, my voice cool and even. Beautiful necklace, by the way. South Sea pearls, aren't
They?
Ethan has excellent taste in gifts. It's a pity I'm so dreadfully allergic to them. Sera's smile stiffened slightly. She subconsciously reached up to touch the pearls. Ethan quickly stepped in, trying to redirect the conversation. Sera was just leaving. She has a rehearsal tomorrow morning. Actually, I wanted to wish you luck for the show, Ethan, Sera said softly, her eyes lingering on him a second too long. And for the wedding next week.
I'm
sure it will be unforgettable. It will be, I agreed, looking directly into her eyes. In ways you can't even begin to imagine. The morning of the Metropolitan Fashion Week arrived. The backstage of the Grand Pavilion was a chaotic symphony of steam, shouting, stylists and models rushing to and fro. Ethan was in his element, pacing the floor, shouting orders, and basked in the attention of the cameras recording the behind-the-scenes preparations. He was wearing his signature bespoke charcoal suit, looking every bit the brilliant, self-made designer. 10 minutes to showtime, the stage manager yelled. Ethan walked over to the media corner, where a dozen prominent fashion journalists were waiting for a pre-show statement. This collection, Ethereal Wings, represents a deeply personal journey for me. Ethan spoke into the microphones, his face radiating handsome confidence. It is a tribute to the raw elegance of movement, the fragility of beauty, and the strength of the modern woman. Every sketch, every seam was born from my own hands, inspired by the muses in my life. Mr. Thorne. The voice did not come from a journalist. It came from Marcus Vance, who had just entered the backstage area accompanied by 2 court bailiffs in uniform. The media cameras instantly turned toward the newcomers. Ethan's smile faltered. He stepped forward, his tone dropping to a harsh whisper. What is the meaning of this? This is a private backstage area. Security, remove these people. We are officers of the court, Mr. Thorne, Marcus Vance said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. He held up a thick packet of legal documents. I am here to serve you with an emergency preliminary injunction issued by the State Supreme Court, along with a temporary restraining order regarding the unauthorized use of copyrighted materials. The journalists began whispering furiously. The cameras continued to roll. What nonsense are you talking about? Ethan hissed, his face turning pale.
Who
is your client? I am, I said. I stepped out from behind the clothing racks. I was wearing a stunning, tailored tuxedo suit in a deep, vibrant emerald green. My hair was swept back, and my eyes were sharp and unwavering. Ethan stared at me as if he were seeing a ghost. Aurora? What is this joke? Have you lost your mind? The designs you are about to showcase on that runway, I said, pointing to the line of models dressed in my silk and wool creations, do not belong to you. Every single one of them was designed, sketched, and drafted by me. We have filed an emergency injunction. If you proceed with this show under your name, you will be in contempt of court, liable for treble damages, and your brand's assets will be frozen immediately. You're lying, Ethan yelled, losing his composure. He turned to the journalists. She's just a disgruntled ex-employee. My fiancé has gone mad. Am I I pulled out my phone, connected it to the large backstage projector. Screen used for the runway lineup, and pressed play. Instantly, the screen filled with side-by-side comparisons of the runway. Sketches. On the left were Ethan's register designs. On the right were my original C80 files, complete with my digital signature metadata, dated 6 months prior, along with the automated logs from my drawing tablet. Below that, a document appeared, the original invoice from the Paris wedding dress designer, clearly showing that the $1.2 million paid by my parents had been used to commission a dress based on a sketch titled, "To My Little Swan, Sera," with a 23-inch waist. The backstage fell dead silent. "My parents gave you that money for our wedding," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "Instead, you used it to fund your mistress's lifestyle and build a brand on the back of my unpaid, uncredited labor. You wanted the person to adapt to the dress, Ethan. But today, the truth is going to adapt to you." The lead investor, Mr. Vance, who had been standing near the entrance, stepped forward, his face dark with fury. "Thorne, what is the meaning of this? Is this true? Is this collection not yours?" "Mr. Vance, I can explain," Ethan stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "It's a misunderstanding, a domestic dispute." "It is not a dispute," Marcus Vance interrupted. "It is a matter of record.
The
court has already approved a temporary freeze on Thorne's corporate accounts, pending a full audit. If you want to run this show tonight to avoid bankrupting your brand with the venue and the sponsors, you have exactly one option." Ethan looked at Marcus, his eyes wide with desperate panic. "What?" Marcus handed him a document. "A full, immediate restructuring agreement. You will sign over 70% of Thorne's equity to Miss Aurora Hayes. She will be credited as the sole founder and creative director of the brand, effective immediately. Furthermore, you will authorize the immediate return of the $1.45 million in wedding funds to her parents' account. 70%. Ethan choked out. "That's my entire company. I built this." "No," I said, stepping closer to him, my gaze freezing him in place. "I built
this.
You just put your name on the door. And today, I'm changing the lock." Ethan looked at the screen, then at the furious investors, and finally at the rolling media cameras. His reputation, his brand, his entire life's work was hanging by a single thread. With trembling hands, he grabbed the pen from Marcus and signed the agreement. "The show starts in 2 minutes, the stage manager whispered, terrified. What do we do?" I turned to the stage manager, my expression calm and commanding.
"Change the
intro projection. Remove Thorne. The collection is now titled Aurora, The Awakening." I walked up to the first model in line, adjusting the collar of the emerald green coat she wore, a design I had bled over for weeks. "Go out there," I smiled, "and show them what a real designer can do." The fashion show was a triumph. The media, captivated by the high-stakes backstage drama and the sheer, breathtaking beauty of the collection, hailed it as the most dramatic and successful debut of the season. The reviews were unanimous. Aurora Hayes was a genius, freed from the shadow of a fraud. But the final act was yet to play out. 3 days later, on what was supposed to be our wedding day, I arrived at the Grand Regency Hotel. The venue was spectacular. Thousands of white roses adorned the altar, and the grand ballroom was filled with hundreds of high society guests who had not yet heard the news of our canceled engagement. Or rather, they had heard rumors, but the invitations had never been formally retracted. I walked into the VIP fitting room. Ethan was already there, looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He had spent the last 72 hours dealing with lawyers and investors who were pulling their funds from his remaining shell companies. When he saw me, he stood up, a desperate, hollow look in his eyes. "Aurora, please, we can still go through with this. The media, they'll think it was just a publicity stunt for the brand. If we get married today, we can salvage the public image. We can share the company." "Get married?" I laughed, a genuine, amused sound. "Ethan, did you really think I came here to marry you?" The door to the fitting room opened, and my father and mother walked in, accompanied by 2 moving crew members. "Dad, Mom," I said, "did the wire transfer clear?" My father looked at Ethan with utter contempt. "Every single dollar has been returned to our account, plus interest and legal fees." "Thank you, Marcus." "Good," I said. I walked over to the prominent spot where the $1.2 million wedding dress hung. The delicate silk chiffon, the Swarovski crystals, the beautiful, hollow dream. "I have a gift for you, Ethan," I said, pulling a pair of fabric shears from my
bag.
"What are you doing?" he gasped. With a swift, precise motion, I drove the shears into the delicate tulle of the bodice. I sliced through the layers of silk, down the side seam, right through the area closest to the heart where the name Sera had once been embroidered. The heavy, $1 million skirt collapsed to the floor in a heap of shredded fabric and glittering, useless crystals. Haute couture is about the person adapting to the dress, remember?
I
Whispered, tossing the shears onto the pile. But this dress was made for a shadow. And I am finally in the light. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan standing alone, amidst the ruins of his perfect, fabricated dream. 6 months later, the evening sky over the city was painted in brilliant hues of violet and gold. Inside the grand exhibition hall of the Museum of Contemporary Art, the launch party for my independent fashion house, Aurora Borealis, was in full swing.
the
Room was a vibrant explosion of color: deep emeralds, electric blues, rich crimsons, and soft, warm cream textures. It was everything Ethan had once called tacky and cluttered. It was alive. Chloe walked up to me, handing me a glass of champagne. A toast to the designer of the year. The critics are calling your new line an emotional masterclass in color and structure. To freedom, I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. By the way, Chloe whispered, leaning in, did you see the news today? I've been a bit busy, I admitted. What happened? Ethan's remaining business went completely bankrupt. He tried to sue Sera to recover the cost of the jewelry and trips he bought her with your parents. Money, but she claimed they were unconditional gifts. She dumped him last week, when his bank accounts were frozen. Last I heard, she's dancing for a third-tier troupe in a small town, and he's working as a junior retail consultant. I paused, looking down at the amber liquid in my glass. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt absolutely nothing. They were simply ghosts from a past life, faded sketches on a discarded draft. Miss Hayes, a young journalist, approached me, pen in hand. Congratulations on the launch. Everyone is talking about your use of vibrant colors. What inspired the sudden shift from your previous, highly minimalist style? I looked around the room, taking in the warmth of the lights, the laughter of the guests, and the beautiful, brilliant colors of the garments hanging like works of art against the gallery walls. I used to think that to be elegant, you had to be quiet, I said softly, offering a genuine, humble smile. But I've learned that true design isn't about fitting into someone else's narrow frame. It's about having the courage to paint your own canvas in every color imaginable.